Hello and welcome to Rich Rides. This week I'm reviewing the new 2019 Triumph Speed Twin. Now this is the bigger brother to the Triumph Street Twin. The Street Twin has a 900cc engine and this has the bigger 1200cc engine. So let's talk about the ergonomics and controls of the bike. First of all, seating position. As you can see, my knees are tucked up, but they sit nicely in the tank. The seat's quite big, so you can go quite far back on it or quite far forward on it. Maybe a bit too far forward, that. Or you can just sit sort of in the middle like I am and find a position for you. So pegs are probably just slightly in front of my hips, and comparing this to the Street Twin, which I think there'll be quite a few comparisons, then it feels slightly more sporty from what I remember. So you do seem a bit more forward and on your wrists a little bit more. But yeah, as a seating position, then it's really comfortable. So the bars themselves are just a nice width. They're not too wide, they're not too thin, and as far as controls are concerned, all fairly normal, but with the exception of a mode button. And as you can see, this has twin dials rather than just a single dial. These are these sort of classic looking dials, rev counter on the right, speed on the left, but they also include little LCDs. So within those LCDs, it has things like your gear position indicator, lots of nice things there. You can see there's 61 miles until I need fuel, proper fuel gauge, which is always good, time, all sorts of stuff in there. So although it looks very retro, then it's actually got all mod cons. So it's got things like ABS and traction control, and like I say, it's got rider modes. So it has 3 different modes. It has rain, road and sport, and to change those is fairly easy. So I go onto there, back off the throttle and dip the clutch, and they may be able to see that I've just put it into sport mode, and it makes a noticeable difference to the mode you're in as well. So when I first got on the bike, if I put into rain now, and it's still got go, but yeah, there's a noticeable difference, because when I first got on it was in sport mode and I was in a town centre and I found the throttle quite binary and quite on off. Then I noticed it was in sport mode, put it into normal mode, which I'll do now, which they call road. We're in it now, and it's quite nice that you can just swap those so easily. So yeah, apart from that, then everything's pretty much as you'd expect and standard. So what else do we want to know ergonomics wise? The mirrors themselves, they work really, really well. They look quite cool and funky as well. At first I thought they looked a bit small, but actually they work nicely, and because they are bar end mirrors, then of course you get a great wide view and you're not getting your arms or shoulders in the way or anything. Because it's a classically styled sort of retro naked bike, then there's no fairings or anything, but the wind is super clean. Nice classically shaped tank. Someone may be able to tell me this, why do they put the tanks, the fuel filler caps off to one side? To me, I'm a bit OCD, I like things to be central, but you see it a lot. So if anyone can answer that, then please do just leave a comment. So as I say, continuing the comfort theme, let's talk about suspension. So I believe the KYB shocks and forks. The front forks are cartridge forks, which are a sort of newfangled thing that are apparently better. So they have a replaceable cartridge within the fork itself rather than just the springs and oil. But they seem to work nicely, and at the rear because it is one of these classically styled bikes. It's not a monoshock, it's got twin shocks on the back. But suspension wise, it's comfortable, it doesn't knock you offline when you hit bumps. So I do think it's slightly firm, but I'd rather it be slightly firm than too soft. And it does work well, it doesn't sort of dive. Something I have noticed brake wise, then on the front it's got a Brembo, on the back it's got a Nissan caliper. The front brake is really, really good, so when you're going at speed and you hit it, it really slows you down. But what I found at low speeds is it can be quite grabby, so I think anything below sort of 30 mile an hour I'm tending to use the rear brake a lot more rather than sort of both. It's probably one of those things you just get used to, of course, but the rear brake itself is really good anyway. As for handling, then I've not had chance to really push it. As you can see, it's a lovely day though, and these tyres are scrubbed in. It's not a brand new bike, so the few corners I've taken with any speed, it's handled brilliantly. It's got a low centre of gravity, so the weight itself is just less than 200 kilos, but it doesn't weigh anything like that, especially once you're moving. But yeah, gearbox and clutch, really light, really easy to use as well. Now come on to one of the most important things about this bike, I think, and that's this engine. It's the 1200 sort of high torque engine. So this is also used in the Scrambler that I reviewed recently, and it's on the Thruxton R as well. So it's a great engine this. It's not super high revving, as you can see. I think the red line there is 7,000, but it's got torque all the way, so you just sort of ride on oodles of torque. So as you can see here, I'm in sort of second gear at the speed limit. Once you get up the speed a bit, then I think anything beyond third, then fourth, fifth and sixth gear, when you're going along on an A road, because of the amount of torque, you can't really tell which gear you're in, because as soon as you pull the throttle or twist the throttle, then it just goes anyway. But yeah, the performance of this bike's fantastic. It's around 100 horsepower and something like 110, 115 newton meters of torque. So as we hit this, I'll give you a quick demonstration. So very, very quickly gets up to speed. So something that the Street Twin was criticised for a little bit was the amount of sort of headline power. Again, that's a very torquey engine, so the headline power didn't really do it justice, I don't think, but that was only about 50 horsepower, which on the plus side meant it was A2 compliant, which is a good thing. But yeah, a lot of people said, oh, it'd be good to have a lot more power. Well, this is virtually twice the power, and you can really, really feel it. And of course, when I just accelerated then, I was in road mode. When you put it in sport, there's a noticeable difference with throttle response and just general oomph that it gives you. I think if you weren't careful, you could get yourself into a bit of trouble. But having said that, it's all manageable power really, and as I keep sort of mentioning, I think that bikes over 100 horsepower are wasted on the road really. As I said, anything up to third gear you're fine, but once you're out of third gear there's not much point because you're already going over the speed limit. I guess the other thing with a bike like this that's very torquey rather than peaky and revvy, if they're real things, then you don't realise how quick you're going sometimes. Also means, like there, I was in third gear to go around that corner. You can just be a bit lazy with the gears. It's also a very relaxing bike to ride. So although it's got no protection, then I think it would be okay for touring. You can probably get some sort of soft panniers or throw over bags because the seat's big enough to take that. I think you can get a fly screen for them too, so that may give you a bit of protection, but even on these kinds of roads at 60 mile an hour, then the wind blast is fine actually. So one negative is something you'd probably get used to, but is the side stand. Not sure whether you can see, there's that little thing there. That's your stand, so you need to get your foot between the peg. I say I've sort of got used to it a bit now, but at first I was struggling with that. So what's it like on these sort of faster roads, motorways, big dual carriageways? As expected, it's a bit windy with it being a naked bike, but the bike feels totally planted, so you could do a little bit of distance on this kind of roads. No, it's not perfect for it, but it's certainly capable. Let's talk about the financials of the bike. So it's around £10,000 new on the road, so it's about what you expect for this kind of bike and this sort of quality bike. Running costs, because it's obviously that bigger engine, I think it's anything over say 600, then you pay a bit more road tax. I think it's £85 a year. And then sort of fuel, then I've just clicked onto the info here and it thinks we're averaging 53 miles per gallon. So that's been a real combination of riding. I think on a run you'd probably get that up to a bit more, but even that's pretty good really, 50 odd. So let's do my usual positives and negatives of the bike. So 3 big positives. Number 1 are its looks, and overall sort of fit and finish and quality. Just it looks fantastic, it's built well, details are really nice. So yeah, so that's a huge positive for this bike. Number 2 is how easy it is to ride and just the quality of the ride. So suspension's really nice, it feels a lot lighter than you'd think. If you mention a 1200 engine, then some people think it's going to be super big and heavy, and because it's got such a low sort of centre of gravity, it just doesn't feel that. Just everything about it's very easy. It's not intimidating at all. Like I say, with a 1200 engine you can sometimes expect it to be a bit cumbersome, but it's the exact opposite. It's sort of super flickable, really nimble, and handles nicely, but it's still comfortable too. And number 3 is just this engine. You can see why Triumph are using this 1200 in so many different models now. It's an absolute beast when it comes to torque and power, but it's still really docile at sort of low revs when you're wanting to just tootle along. So sounds superb. This has just got the stock exhaust, but it still sounds great. Like I say, it pulls like a train when you want to. I'm in sport mode again now and it absolutely flies, but even at low speeds it's docile. So yeah, the engine is just so versatile, it's absolutely superb. So on to the negatives of this bike. I'm happy to say there's hardly any, and the ones that there are only very minor. So the first one is that side stand. Like I say, I couldn't even see the thing when I first got on. I've got a bit more used to it, but with big boots on then you're struggling a bit to get that. You'd probably get used to it a bit, but that's just something to mention there. The only other couple of things I noticed is that if you are, especially in, well, that's one of them. I don't know whether it's this particular bike, but the front brake can be a bit grabby. And as you heard, then this also squeaks for some reason, does this one. but again, I'm sure it's just the pads on this particular bike. And then the third thing is the throttle is a bit on-off, especially in sports sort of mode, which is fine when you want it to be like that, but when you're in traffic then it's a bit on-off rather than progressive, so you have to use the clutch a bit more. Like I say, you probably wouldn't be running in sport mode if you were commuting or in traffic, and that does make it a little bit better, but even then in sort of first gear it can be a little bit on-off. But they're all fairly minor things, and all those huge positives massively outweigh it, so I do really like this bike. Of all the Triumph range, then I do think this is the favourite. I've ridden quite a few now. I thought the Scrambler 1200 XE that I recently rode would be my favourite, and although I like the looks of that best, then actually I much prefer this to ride. And to my good old question of would I buy one of these, then yes, I think I would. I think for my next bike it is going to be something like this, and this is definitely up there in the sort of top 3. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please do like and subscribe, and if you hit the little bell notification, it will notify you every time I release a new video, and I typically do that every Monday. I'd just like to say a huge thank you to A1 Moto. They help support this channel by lending me bikes, and I'm really grateful for that. So A1 Moto, a Triumph main dealer based in the centre of York. They've got every single make and model you can imagine there. So all the Triumph range. They've got a lot of demonstrators too. They arrange ride outs. They've got an on-site cafe. So I highly recommend you speak to those guys if you're interested in buying a Triumph, or even if you own a Triumph, then they have a good reputation for servicing. Like I say, they arrange rides out for Triumph owners too. So do go see them. So speak to Stuart there, and I'm sure they'd be delighted to help you out.